The 2025 NHL Draft is set with the NHL releasing their first round picks of who's drafting where. Carolina Hurricanes hold the 29th, as we all know, but the real question is, are they drafting or are they trading that pick?
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everyday for making this your first listen of the day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, also the co-host of the Searchcast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a good show for you on Tuesday, as it's all about the NHL Draft, which will be in 3 days. It is later this week, so get ready for a lot more content when it comes to that. Where do the Hurricanes stand in the first round? What are other significant things to look at when it comes to the first round draft picks? What are the options for the Carolina Hurricanes at 29? Because we've talked about it here on the show over the last few weeks of possible potential players. What does the list look like now? And then finally, will they trade down or up or just trade the pick in general? That is the real question when it comes to what is going to happen for the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, the actual draft order, which was released by the NHL on Monday, looking at Carolina's got the 20th overall pick. The other big notables when it comes to having multiple picks in the first round, how about Chicago with having the 3rd and the 25th? Of course, they got that from Toronto. San Jose holds the 2nd and the 30th, thanks to Dallas. But it's Nashville and Philadelphia, which are the big players when it comes to this, as the fact that the Nashville Predators hold the 5th and the 23rd and the 26th overall picks. That is really interesting when it comes down to that. And then when you look at the Philadelphia Flyers, they hold the 6th, 22nd because of Colorado, and the 31st because of Edmonton. And then Calgary holding the 18th because of New Jersey, and the 32nd because of Florida. So you do have multiple teams. You do have a bunch of teams with multiple picks, and also Montreal holding the 16th because of Calgary and the 17th. So they actually go back to back in this draft. So that's kind of what's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because you look at a bunch of teams with multiple picks in this one. So now it just comes down to, what do these teams do in terms of, picking, do they use them for some trade packages, or they take a lot of players? That's kind of the big thing. But that's where I feel like it's one of those things of what is kind of next in terms of just how the draft will play out, especially with those guys being where they're at, and how does that shake things up, even for Carolina? Because like I said, you got Nashville with 3 picks before you get to Carolina. Philadelphia is going to have 2 of them. Montreal is going to have their 2. Chicago is going to have theirs as well. I know San Jose is going to be a little bit later, and so is Calgary, but like I said, even for Montreal, a team who made the playoffs, they got back-to-backs. Nashville had a very bad season. They get, like I said, 3. Chicago's going to get a couple. And whoever lands where for the Hurricanes, I think that's going to be the biggest shakeup when you look at this draft, because it's decentralized for the first time in a very long time. And usually you think of, GMs going to talk to each other, in and around the draft. Even on the draft floor, there's possible moves happening, but now it's kind of, where do you go from here? How are all the calls going to work out? And you have to, because usually when you're on the floor, you might be hearing rumblings of things happening, but now it's like, where do you hear those rumblings with the decentralized draft that's going to be held in LA? I know all the players, the big prospects are going to be there at least, but how are the trades going to shake up? And I think that's where it's going to be very interesting of how day one plays out with this draft of our GM's going to be able to talk to each other. Yeah, I know they're going to call, but it's like you getting the usual, hearings that you hear at a draft like that where everyone's together. Like I said, Carolina's at 29. You got a bunch of teams already picking a lot ahead of them, and depending on their needs, this could go in so many directions of, are we going to get surprise picks a lot higher than people anticipated on? Or guys who are considered higher might drop a little bit farther? Do you see, goalies go in the first round? Because supposedly there's talks of maybe no goalies going around one, but that's kind of the big question for, how this draft is going to play. And I think for Carolina, it puts them in an interesting position to where, we look back at the 24 draft, they had pick 28, they jump out of it, they go get Chicago's 34th and 50th. And, that's a good possibility. And of course, then we know 2 drafts ago for 2023, they picked up Bradley Nadeau at 30. And he's probably one of their best pure goal scorers in the organization in terms of the system with just the prospects. But like I said, this is where it's going to get interesting of a draft where you have, like I said, Nashville's got 3 picks. You got Montreal going back to back. Chicago's got multiple picks. Even Calgary's got multiple picks. And yeah, that's even with the fact that one of them is the last pick of the first round. But especially with those teams a little bit farther down, in terms of the standings last year and where they stand. I mean, good for Nashville, I guess, to go and have 3 picks just in the first round. And like I said, that's just before 26. And their other one is at 23. Like I said, in Philadelphia, who just picked up Trevor Zegras, traded the 45th. So they kept all of their first rounders, which is crazy to me. The fact that you go get Trevor Zegras, you give up a fourth rounder in 2026, you give up Pulling, and you give up the 45th, but you still somehow kept your 6th, 22nd, and 31st overalls. Like, for me, that's kind of crazy when you look at Anaheim, where it's like Anaheim picks 10th. They easily could have gotten the 22nd if they really wanted to, or at least the 31st. They could have gotten at least another first-round draft pick if they really wanted to for Trevor Zegras, but it was just a 45th overall, a player in a 4th rounder for next year. Like, hey, good for them. I mean, it definitely worked out in terms of Philadelphia's favor. One team I did forget to mention is having multiple picks in the first round. The Columbus Blue Jackets, 14th and 20th, and that's because of Minnesota. So, even like I said, a lot of the Metro teams, for the most part, a good number of them, are going to have multiple picks in this round. So, obviously, when you look at the draft, not a lot of guys who are going to get picked in the first round make it to the AHL that fast, but, there's a lot more prospects in the cupboard. But thankfully for the Hurricanes, they don't really have to do – we already have a lot of prospects already in the system, so it's not like they're really dying for – having to get multiple first rounders or stuff like that. So, like I said, it'd be very interesting for the Hurricanes. But in terms of what Carolina looks like outside of just the first round, they do currently have picks at 29, like I said. They have the 87th overall in round 3 because from Tampa Bay. That was for the Jake Gensel trade. And then they got the 4th round pick, which is 125th overall. Then they have 2 picks in the 6th round. 183 from Tampa, and then 189 overall. And then in round 7, they have 221. So this is a draft where you don't have a 2nd and you don't have 5th, but you have 2 6. And there's a long gap between your first round pick at 29 and your 3rd at 87. And knowing how Carolina is, they would love to. Picks like these in the late rounds, they usually try to trade, out of the first round, go get some, multiple picks later in the draft. I would not be surprised if they go and trade the 29th overall to go get, maybe 2 possible picks in, the 2nd round, or at least the 2nd rounder and somewhere else in the draft. So only time will tell. But here's my thing. What if they do keep their 29th overall pick, and who would they actually draft at that spot? Well, stick around. We'll talk about possible options for the Hurricanes at 29 here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Cracking a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that work as hard as you do. So get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So, like I said, you look at where we're at with the Carolina Hurricanes, in that they hold the 29th pick. They have no picks in the second round. They have 1 in the third, a fourth, 2 6 and a 7th rounder. And like I said before, you look at the Hurricanes, and they are a team who have traded back in the past before. Like I said, we saw it last year in the 24 draft with the Blackhawks, and they got 2 second round. They got a second. They got a 30th and a 57th overall pick, or 34th and a 57th overall. But what if the Hurricanes don't trade that pick away? What if they do stay at 29? What if they go, okay, there's someone we really like here. Let's go keep it and move on from there. And, we've done some potential guys to pick up at the first round, at 20th overall for the Hurricanes on the show. And a lot of people, Scott Wheeler from The Athletic and, some other projected, other guys from The Athletic, there's been some mock drafts going on, even, mock drafts at Locked On from our Locked On Prospect podcast. Some are saying that Colin Potter from Arizona State could be the guy the Hurricanes might go for at that pick. And for me, I wouldn't mind Colin Potter just for the fact of what he can possibly do. Is just, you look at a guy who at Arizona State, excuse me, I think was really not used very much in terms of his skill set at Arizona State. He's a really good player. He knows how to, be really explosive on his stop starts. He's got, the fact that his skating and acceleration is very good and very high. And, there's still, some things to work on, but he finds a way to get passes off, do a lot of things that really make him, a really solid player. And, play even for a defensive team that he played for like Arizona State, he still kind of showed off what he can do offensively. Of course, points wise, it doesn't really translate when you have, 13 goals, 22 points in 35 games for Arizona State. But you look at on the U.S. national U18 team, in just the World Juniors, in 7 games, he had 4 goals and 8 points, and he was a +8 in those games. So that's still pretty impressive for a guy like Potter, who didn't really get to show off very much of his skill set at Arizona State last year. But when you play someone on the U18 team, even especially at World Juniors, that's still really impressive for what he could do. The thing is, he is a left shot. He's 5'10", 172. They're considering him as a center winger. So I know a lot of people are going to say it, but what about his size? Because you already got Logan Stankoven, who's 5'8". You already got Seth Jarvis, who's 5'11". Do you need another guy who's 5'10"? And, just under 180 pounds. And for me, it's guys who have skill can produce well in the NHL level. Yeah, do you want some size? Yes, but you don't have to have size everywhere. And I think if you have a good skill set of a guy who can play center, I think that wouldn't be a bad option to have if you think he fits the system well. If he fits the system well, and if you have guys around him who have size, I think it would work out. because we all know Carolina really likes their guys, that are skilled players that maybe aren't as tall. Because, like I said, you got those Jarvises, Stankovens, all of them. So getting a guy like Colin Potter wouldn't be too bad. Now, for me, everyone knows this. I would love for the Hurricanes to go get Cole McKinney, who played for the U.S. National Development Team last year and is committed to the University of Michigan for this upcoming 25-26, season. Great two-way center. He is actually 6 foot, 201, and he's a right shot. This is what I really like about him. For the fact that he's a right shot center, he is 6 foot, and he can play really well. And the fact that he's also a PK specialist already at 18, and he's already a face-off specialist too. And especially for the Carolina Hurricanes, who love guys that are who really try to pride themselves on face-offs. For the fact that McKinney's already considered a face-off specialist is huge, and the fact that even then, like, he might not be, obviously he's going to Michigan this season, but give him like a season or two or even 3. If he's ready to go, I think you have a great guy you could slot into the PK within a couple seasons. And yes, even with the fact that you've got like elite prospects having him at 51, or Bob McKenzie at 37, or Flo Hockey at 32, or even, Angel Central Scouting has him 32nd in terms of North American skaters, he's still within that range of, you can go get him in the first round at 29 if you wanted to, but even if you draft back into the second round and you're still within those first, I would say 5 to 6 picks in round 2, I think you could still get Cole McKinney there, because a lot of people are projecting him around the 37, 38 range. But I don't think it would be a stretch if you get him at 29. Like I said, it's the same. He brings a lot of high-end attention, very determined, really good attention to the detail. Forces a lot of turnovers, wins a lot of puck battles, and he protects the puck, which is something the Hurricanes really like, is guys who can protect the puck on a lot of possession play. And the fact that he can steal pucks, and the fact that he can transition really well too. Plus, like I said, good physical body, can be huge on the PK and win a lot of faceoffs. And here's the thing: when you look at his stats overall from this past year, just in the USHL with the National Development Team, 15 goals, 26 points in 23 games was a +8. That's really good for that many games. He was still able to put up over a point per game. And then for the U.S. National 18 team, just overall, how about 60 games? He had 27 goals, 34 assists for 61 points, and a +18. And even then at the World Juniors, in 7 games, 3 goals, 5 points, and had a very great goal as well in one of those games, and he finished as a +4. Yeah, he was almost a point per game just in the World Juniors in 7 of those. Got 3 goals in 7 games. But for the fact that you look at overall for the U.S. national team, you cannot scoff at the fact that he was over a point per game in 60 complete games. He had 61 points. He can score. He can make the assist. And he's on the ice a lot when his team scores for great position play. +18, I don't think you can look at that and be like, yeah, you have to love that. You have to appreciate the fact that he is a guy in Cole McKinney who can really fit this system well. Other players to possibly look at, we talked about Jack Murtaugh out of, who's going to Boston University, Cole McKinney's teammate. This guy is a center/left winger. He's also 6'1", 198. So right around the same size as McKinney, someone who's considered a workhorse, a speedster, and a heavy shooter, which, the Hurricanes would love to have that as well. And even looking at his numbers from this past year in the USHL as well, 18 points in 24 games. How about for the U18 team overall? 22 goals, 53 points in 56 games, and was a +14. And even at the U18 World Juniors, how about 6 points in 7 games and was a +4? Just looking at Murtaugh and McKinney alone, I think you're looking at one of those two guys as possible good options. And even when you look at the possibility of Colin Potter wouldn't be a bad option as well. But if you feel like you can get Murtaugh or McKinney, of course, for me, I would love to get McKinney. I think you look at one of those two guys. I know people have asked about, a goaltender in that position. I just don't know where, goalies will be there by the time you get to that pick. And it's just, I know they're talking about I think it was Ravenbacher is one of those guys for a goalie, and I just don't see him going down that far because a lot of teams, like there's people like Nashville's picking him early, Columbus is picking him early. I just don't see the Hurricanes going for a goalie in round one. Now, let's say if they trade back into round two, get a couple picks, I could see them going to get maybe like a Murtaugh or a McKinney in their first pick of round two, and then possibly go get their goalie in the second round if they really think they can get a goalie there. It's just all really depends. So for me, if they do have options at 29, I think Murtaugh or McKinney would be great options. Even Colin Potter, if they think he's a good spot as well. But for me, I think McKinney might be that guy. Now, that being said, would the Hurricanes trade up in the draft, or would they trade down and see what they can do in the later rounds, or do they just trade the pick overall? Well, stick around. We'll talk about that here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So, like I said, the Hurricanes do hold the 29th pick, and the big question is, will they keep it and draft someone? I hope that they would, but we all know from previous drafts that's not really the case. And, they have traded back before. It's just, if they do, what does that look like? What could the Hurricanes possibly do in terms of moving up, moving down, stuff like that? Does it, become part of a trade package, later on? And I think it all really just depends on what they feel like is probably the best thing for them at the time. So if they do trade back, who are the likely candidates that the Hurricanes could potentially look at when you look at round, in the later rounds? And I think for me, if you're looking at teams who have picks in round two that could be possible options to have, I think you're looking at possibly, you have Philadelphia, who's got multiple second round picks as well. They got picks at 36. They got them at 40. They got it at 48, even though they traded it. Or now not 48 anymore, but like I said, they have multiple picks in the first round. I think those are guys you can possibly look at. Even the Ducks, the Ducks have 45. They also got 60. Could those be potential options? The Bruins, they have picks at 60 and 51. Is there possibly something there as well? I even said in a recent article, if they want to go back and get some, like I said, second round picks, if this team is up for it, why not the Seattle Kraken? The Kraken hold the 38th, and they also hold the 57th that they got from Toronto. Why not possibly look at Seattle and see if you can get some picks there? Because, like I said, if you go get Cole McKinney at 38, if he drops that far, then that's great for you. And then you still have pick 57. And if you want to go get your goalie or you want to go pick up another player, you can do that as a possibility as well. And then, like I said, Philadelphia's got 36 and they got 40. They did have 45, and now it's the Ducks. And, Philly's got a lot of picks there. Why not talk to them? Or even Chicago. Chicago's got 62 and 34. So maybe the Hurricanes want to go and trade back for, two of Chicago's picks again. Those are some possibilities. There's a lot of avenues the Hurricanes could go down here if they want to go trade for certain picks in round two, if they want to put themselves into a good spot. And like I said, Nashville's got 3 picks in the first round. In the second round, they have pick 35, and they also got pick 55. If Nashville thinks that, hey, let's just go get a lot of our players now in round one, maybe round two could be available. So I think moving up, I just don't know if the Hurricanes will they be willing to move up? And the thing is, if they do, where do they go from there? That's kind of think is the big question, is where are you going up to? And who's going to be willing to trade their picks? That's kind of my main thing. And there's been supposedly the Mammoth are looking to trade their 4th overall pick, but it's like, what's the asking price to go get a 4? I don't see the Hurricanes moving up that much. And I just feel like the Canes aren't a team that are willing to go sell the future or do anything crazy enough to move up. They're just not a team that really moves up in drafts very much. They're always a team that, okay, we're in the late 20s. Maybe we can go get some more trade assets. And like I said, they have no second rounders. So this could be the perfect draft for them to be like, well, we get to trade 29 and maybe we'll talk to Seattle or Chicago or Nashville or whoever and go, and even Boston, and go get 2 second rounders and just give up 29. And maybe one of these other teams might have 3 or even 4 picks in the first round. Why not go do it? So I just don't see them going up in the draft. I see them going more backwards in the draft more than anything else. Could their pick be part of a possible trade package now to get a player that's already in the NHL? Maybe. I guess depends on what player they might be going after, and if the team wants that. It's a first round pick, but it's 29. Our team's really jumping the gun to give up their current players now for 29. Even teams at the bottom of the barrel, is there someone there? Maybe, but I think when you're looking at a 2026 draft that's maybe a little bit stronger than 25, I could see a first rounder next year going, because the Hurricanes have 2 first round picks next year. Theirs in Dallas is because of the Mika Rantanen trade. So maybe there's a potential next year's first that could be leaving more than this year's, but who knows? Anything really happened in this draft, but let's say it's not, the trade isn't part, the pick isn't part of a trade package for a guy now at the draft level. Where is this looking? I don't see them going up. The Hurricanes aren't really a team that moves up very much in the draft. Like I said, I think this is where the Hurricanes are known to go backwards. And I think this is a case, once again, where the Hurricanes go back in the draft. And like I said, you could talk to Boston, Seattle, Nashville, Chicago. I think those are the teams where you're kind of looking, okay, where can we go in round 2 to go get multiple picks? And I think those are your likely candidates. Even Philadelphia. Like I said, as of right now, Philly's got a lot of picks right now. And that's even with draft, even trading theirs away to Anaheim. So there's just those big questions, like who could they really talk to that they'd be like, hey, let's go trade our 29, and let's see if one of these teams in the later rounds want to go and potentially give up 2 of our picks for that. That's where I see it more than anything else, of the Hurricanes just being like, 29's fine, but we think we can get more out of it. Let's just go do that. So that's where I feel like if the Hurricanes aren't going to draft a guy at 29, which, like I said, you could be Murtaugh, Potter, McKinney, who I'd really love if the Hurricanes picked him up. If they don't go for a guy there, let's say they can still get at least Murtaugh or McKinney in the early second round. I can see with the Hurricanes like, hey, we can get this guy in the second round. Let's just trade 29 now. Let's get some draft capital and get 2 picks in round 2. I think that's probably what's most likely going to happen. But like I said, who really knows, with how crazy the draft is, and the Hurricanes do like to surprise people. So only time will tell, but luckily, in terms of talking about the draft, it's not that far away, and we'll know as we get closer to what the Hurricanes do. Do they stick at 29, or do they go and trade it for more draft capital? Hey guys, so that was the edition of Locked On. Thank you for making the podcast. There is no off season, and we bring you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneShoeZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where you can click the link trees in my bios to where you can find all of my written content over at thehockeywriters.com. If you want to check out my other podcasts, well, it's the Searchcast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. If you want to find Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and review, because I might just read it on the show. for YouTube? Well, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Make sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well. Share with other Caniacs so they become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Tuesday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.